They laughed in my face, mocking the simple dress I wore to my own wedding, believing I was just some poor girl clinging desperately to get into their family. What they didn't know was that I had $54 million and a plan that would silence them forever. This isn't a love story. This is a verdict. My name is Elena Ward, and I should have known what was coming when I saw Vivian Thornton's smile at 9:30 that morning. It wasn't the warm smile of a mother-in-law welcoming her son's new bride. It was the predatory grin of a woman who'd already decided I didn't belong, studying my simple cream-colored dress like a prosecutor examining evidence of my unworthiness. "Well," Vivian announced to the cluster of Thornton relatives gathered in the hotel's marble lobby, her voice carrying that particular brand of aristocratic disdain. "I suppose not everyone can afford Vera Wang." The words hit like ice water. Around us, Richard's family members, his sister Clara, his aunts, his cousins all turned to look, their gazes swept over my dress, my simple pearl earrings, my understated makeup, and I watched their expressions shift from polite curiosity to barely concealed amusement. "Mother," Richard said weakly from beside me, but his protest held all the conviction of wet tissue paper. Clara stepped forward, her designer heels clicking against the marble. "Oh, it's charming," she said, the word dripping with false sweetness. "Very budget-conscious. Richard always did have a soft spot for charity cases." The blood rushed to my cheeks, but I kept my expression neutral. I'd learned long ago that showing weakness only invited more predators to the feast. "Elena probably spent everything she had just to get here," one of the aunts whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Poor thing. At least she tried." Vivian circled me like a shark, her gaze calculating. "Well, dear, I suppose we can't all marry into established families. Some of us have to work our way up." She paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "Don't worry. We'll teach you how to dress appropriately for family functions. Can't have you embarrassing the Thornton name at every event." The lobby fell silent except for the soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. Richard stood frozen beside me, his face flushed with embarrassment not for his family's cruelty, but for having married someone they deemed beneath him. "I appreciate the concern," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Clara laughed, a sharp sound that echoed off the marble walls. "Concern? Oh, honey, this isn't concern. This is damage control." She turned to address the family group. "I mean, look at her. Richard could have had his pick of anyone in our circle, and he chose this." The word "this" landed like a slap. I felt every pair of eyes in that lobby dissecting me, cataloging my perceived failures, my obvious poverty, my shameful inadequacy. In their minds, I was already filed away as Richard's embarrassing mistake, the gold digger who'd somehow tricked their precious son into marriage. "Perhaps," Vivian said, her voice taking on the tone of someone delivering a public service announcement, "we should discuss appropriate attire for future family gatherings. Elena, dear, there are certain standards we maintain. Image is everything in our circles." "Of course," I replied, my hands clasped tightly behind my back to hide their trembling. "Wonderful," Vivian beamed. "Clara has excellent taste. I'm sure she'd be happy to take you shopping, help you find something more suitable for someone in your position." The condescension was suffocating. Every word was chosen to remind me that I was the outsider, the charity case, the mistake that needed constant correction and guidance. Richard's continued silence felt like betrayal, each passing second without his defense another nail in the coffin of whatever respect I might have had for him. "The reception starts in 2 hours," Clara announced, checking her diamond-encrusted watch. "Maybe we can do something about her makeup, too. And that hair?" She shook her head sadly. "Richard, what were you thinking?" But I was already thinking, behind my forced smile and downcast eyes. My mind was working, calculating, planning. They thought they were looking at a victim, someone they could reshape and control, someone grateful for their cruel charity. They had no idea they were staring at someone who could buy and sell them all without blinking. As the family dispersed, their laughter echoing through the lobby, I excused myself quietly. Richard barely noticed me leave, too busy accepting congratulations and apologetic pats on the shoulder from relatives who were already treating him like a widower. The elevator doors closed behind me with a soft ding, and I finally allowed my smile to fade. In the mirrored walls, I studied my reflection, the simple dress they'd mocked, the understated jewelry they'd dismissed, the woman they'd just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Because while they'd been busy cataloging my failures, I'd been memorizing theirs. The hotel room door clicked shut behind me with the finality of a vault closing. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence wash over me, feeling the weight of their mockery settle into something harder, sharper, something useful. I walked to the window overlooking the manicured gardens where guests were already beginning to gather for cocktails. From this height, they looked like expensive dolls arranged for someone else's amusement. How fitting. The mini safe sat tucked beneath the mahogany desk, its digital display blinking patiently. My fingers moved across the keypad, a date that meant nothing to anyone but me. The day I'd sold my shares in the tech startup that had made me richer than the Thorntons could imagine in their most ambitious dreams. The heavy door swung open with a soft mechanical whir. Inside, nestled between my passport and emergency cash, lay the folder that contained my real identity. Bank statements showing a balance that started with 54 and ended with far too many zeros for the Thornton family's comfort. Investment portfolios that would make Richard's trust fund look like pocket change. Property deeds for buildings in Manhattan that Vivian probably shopped in without realizing I owned them. I pulled out the most recent statement and laid it on the pristine white bedspread. The numbers stared back at me, cold and factual and absolutely devastating. $54,300,762, plus change. While they'd been downstairs dissecting my appearance like vultures over carrion, I'd been living with the knowledge that I could purchase their precious family estate twice over and still have enough left to buy the yacht they'd bragged about during the rehearsal dinner. But money wasn't the weapon I needed. Not yet. I reached for my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't called in months. Marissa Hale, the best legal strategist money could buy, and someone who understood that sometimes justice required a more creative approach than courtroom theatrics. The phone rang twice before her familiar voice answered. "Elena, congratulations on the wedding. How are you enjoying married life?" "They think I'm poor," I said without preamble. "They think I'm some desperate woman who trapped their son for his money." A pause. Then Marissa's low chuckle. How wonderfully naive of them. What did they do? I told her everything. Every snide comment, every dismissive glance, every word designed to remind me of my supposed place in their hierarchy. As I spoke, I could hear Marissa's pen scratching against paper, taking notes with the precision of a surgeon planning an operation. "Public humiliation at your own wedding," she mused when I finished. "In front of what? 50 witnesses? 100? More, the guest list was extensive." "Perfect. And your husband's response to their behavior?" Silence. Complete, cowardly silence. Another pause. Longer this time. "Elena, I have to ask, are you sure you want to go down this road? Once we start, there's no taking it back. These people will never forgive you for showing them who you really are." I looked out the window again. Vivian was holding court near the rose garden, no doubt regaling the other guests with stories about her son's unfortunate choice in wives. Clara stood beside her, laughing at something with the kind of casual cruelty that came from a lifetime of never facing consequences. "Forgiveness isn't what I'm after," I said. "I want them to understand exactly who they decided to mock." "Then, here's what we're going to do," Marissa said, her voice taking on the focused tone I'd heard her use in boardrooms when she was about to destroy someone's life. "You're going to let them think they've won. Let them believe you're exactly what they think you are, weak. grateful, malleable. Let them dig themselves deeper. And then we remind them that assumptions can be expensive mistakes. Very expensive. Papers rustled on her end. I'll need you to document everything, every slight, every comment, every moment they try to humiliate you. Can you do that without arousing suspicion? I thought about Richard's complete obliviousness to his family's cruelty, his assumption that I would simply accept whatever treatment they doled out. That won't be a problem. They think I'm too intimidated to fight back. Excellent. How public do you want this to be when it happens? I watched Clara gesture dismissively toward the hotel, probably making another joke about my budget accommodations. As public as possible. I want everyone who witnessed their behavior to see exactly how wrong they were about me. Consider it done, Elena. Yes. They have no idea what they've awakened, do they? I smiled for the first time since stepping into that lobby. None whatsoever. After ending the call, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop. The screen flickered to life, revealing browser bookmarks that would have made Vivian's head spin my investment accounts, my property management dashboard, my charitable foundation that donated more in a single quarter than the Thorntons spent on their annual European vacations. I pulled up the foundation's latest financial report. The number at the bottom made me laugh out loud in the empty room. Last year alone, I'd given away more money than Richard was worth. And they thought I was after his inheritance. I closed the laptop and began to change clothes, trading my simple wedding dress for an even more understated cocktail dress. If they wanted to see poverty, I'd give them exactly what they expected to see. Let them feast on their assumptions. Let them grow fat and careless on their own superiority. Because in 2 hours, I would walk back into that reception with the same quiet smile, the same humble demeanor, the same carefully crafted image of grateful inadequacy. And while they were busy congratulating themselves on putting me in my place, I would be laying the groundwork for the most expensive lesson in humility they would ever receive. The game had officially begun. The cocktail reception was in full swing by 7:15. The hotel's grand ballroom filled with the soft clink of champagne glasses and the murmur of polite conversation. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, invisible in my simple black dress, while the Thornton family held court near the bar. Perfect. The recording device nestled in my small clutch purse was no bigger than a lipstick tube, but it could capture conversations from 20 feet away with crystal clarity. Marissa had insisted on professional equipment. If we're going to destroy them, she'd said, we need evidence that would hold up in court. I positioned myself behind a marble pillar decorated with white orchids, close enough to hear every word but hidden from view. The acoustics in this corner of the ballroom were perfect sound carried beautifully from their little circle to my hiding spot. I still can't believe Richard went through with it, Clara was saying, her voice carrying that familiar tone of amused disgust. I thought he'd come to his senses at the last minute. The poor boy was trapped, Vivian replied, swirling her martini. You know how these women operate. They get their claws in and don't let go until the ring is on their finger. I pressed the record button on my phone as backup, then activated the professional device. Every word was being captured in pristine digital quality. Did you see that pathetic dress? Another voice, Richard's Aunt Margaret. Probably bought it off the clearance rack at some department store. The poor thing probably spent her entire savings on it. Laughter rippled through their group, cold, cutting laughter that sliced through the elegant ambiance of the ballroom. Oh, well, we'll have to teach her how to dress appropriately now, Vivian continued. Can't have her embarrassing us at every family function. The country club has standards, after all. Do you think she even knows what the country club is? Clara giggled. I bet she's never set foot in one. If only they knew I owned a membership to 3 country clubs more exclusive than theirs, including one where their own application had been rejected twice. The real problem, Vivian said, lowering her voice conspiratorially, is Richard's assets. We need to make sure she doesn't get her hands on any significant portion of his inheritance. Gold diggers like her are dangerous once they have legal standing. My blood turned to ice. The recording device felt suddenly heavy in my hand. "What do you suggest?" Margaret asked. "I've already spoken to our family attorney. We're going to encourage Richard to restructure his trust fund, put more restrictions on spousal access, maybe create some prenuptial adjustments. It's not too late if we word it correctly." "Brilliant," Clara said. "We can't let some nobody from nowhere walk away with Thornton money when this marriage inevitably falls apart." "And it will fall apart," Vivian said with absolute certainty. "Once she realizes she's not going to get the lifestyle she was expecting, she'll move on to her next target. These women always do." I leaned closer to the pillar, making sure every word was being captured. They were discussing my financial future like I was livestock being appraised for slaughter. "The key is to make her feel unwelcome without being obvious about it," Vivian continued. "Constant reminders of her place, her inadequacies. Eventually, she'll either conform completely to our expectations or she'll leave on her own." "What if she fights back?" someone asked. The laughter that followed was sharp and dismissive. "With what?" Clara scoffed. "She has nothing. No family connections, no money, no social standing. What's she going to do, hire a lawyer with her savings account balance?" "Even if she tried," Vivian added, "who would believe her word against ours? We're respected members of this community. She's a nobody who managed to seduce our son during a vulnerable moment." The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, each revelation more damaging than the last. They discussed specific strategies for undermining my confidence, ways to exclude me from family decisions, and even contingency plans for if Richard started defending me too vigorously. "We just need to be patient," Vivian concluded. "Break her down slowly, make her grateful for whatever scraps of acceptance we throw her way. Eventually, she'll realize she doesn't belong and remove herself from the equation." "And if she doesn't," Margaret pressed, "then we'll make the decision for her. There are ways to encourage departures. Legal ways, of course." The threat hung in the air like smoke. I felt my hands trembling with rage, but I forced them steady. Every second of this conversation was being preserved for posterity. Finally, they began to disperse, moving toward the dinner tables. I waited until they were well clear of the area before stepping out from behind the pillar, my heart pounding with adrenaline and fury. 23 minutes of recording. 23 minutes of them confessing to conspiracy, financial manipulation, and emotional abuse. 23 minutes of evidence that would destroy their reputation and expose them for exactly what they were. I slipped into the ladies' lounge and called Marissa. "I have it," I said when she answered. "Everything. Their entire strategy, their plans for my finances, their intentions to systematically break me down until I leave." "How clear is the audio?" "Crystal clear. Professional quality. You can hear every word, every laugh, every cruel calculation." A pause. "Elena, this is better than I hoped. What they're describing could constitute conspiracy and potential harassment, and discussing manipulation of your husband's assets while you're legally married." Another pause. "This is explosive. What's our next move?" "Now we let them execute their plan. Let them think it's working. Meanwhile, I'll prepare the legal framework for your counterattack. How public do you want the revelation to be?" I thought about their laughter, their casual cruelty, their absolute certainty that I was powerless against them. "I want everyone who heard them mock my dress to hear exactly what they really think of me, and I want them to hear it at the moment of their highest confidence." "Consider it done, Elena?" "Yes." "Sard, they just handed you the keys to their own destruction. I hope they enjoyed that conversation, because it's going to be the most expensive 23 minutes of their lives." I ended the call and checked my reflection in the mirror. Same simple dress, same understated makeup, same humble expression. But now I carried something far more powerful than any designer gown or family name. I carried the truth, and I was about to weaponize it. The moment came at 8:45, just as the main course was being cleared away and the champagne was flowing freely enough to loosen tongues and lower inhibitions. The ballroom buzzed with conversation and laughter, the Thornton family basking in the glow of what they believed was their complete social victory. I had spent the entire dinner playing my part perfectly, quiet nods when spoken to, grateful smiles when included in conversations, eyes downcast when the subtle barbs came my way. Richard's relatives had grown bolder as the evening progressed, their comments more cutting, their laughter more pronounced. "Elena seems so overwhelmed by everything," I'd heard Clara whisper to a cousin during the salad course. "Poor thing probably never imagined she'd be at an event this elegant." "We'll have to ease her into our social circle gradually," Vivian had added with mock concern. "Can't have her embarrassing herself at important functions?" Each comment was a gift, really, more ammunition for what was coming. I waited until the natural lull that always came between dinner and the speeches, the moment when conversations died down and people began looking toward the head table expectantly. Perfect timing. I stood slowly, my chair scraping softly against the marble floor. A few heads turned my way, curious but not alarmed. After all, what could the quiet little wife possibly have to say? "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the sudden hush. "Could I have everyone's attention for just a moment?" Richard looked surprised but pleased. Probably thought I was finally going to thank his family for their warm welcome. Vivian's smile was indulgent, like a teacher allowing a shy student to speak. Clara actually rolled her eyes, clearly expecting some fumbling expression of gratitude. "I wanted to address something that's been weighing on my mind today," I continued, my voice steady and clear. "You see, I've heard some interesting conversations this evening about my situation." The first hint of uncertainty flickered across Vivian's face. "I know some of you have concerns about my background, my financial status, my suitability for this family." I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the room, making eye contact with as many guests as possible. "And I think it's only fair that I address those concerns directly." "Elena, dear," Vivian interjected, her voice tight with warning. "Perhaps this isn't the appropriate time." "Oh, but I think it's the perfect time," I said, my smile never wavering. After all, transparency is so important in families. Don't you think? The room had gone completely silent now. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving, sensing the shift in atmosphere. I've heard words like gold digger and charity case whispered throughout this beautiful reception. I've been told I need to learn how to dress appropriately, how to behave in your social circles, how to be grateful for whatever acceptance I'm given. Richard's face had gone pale. Clara looked like she was choking on her champagne, but Vivian's eyes had narrowed with the sharp intelligence of someone who suddenly realized the game had changed. "I've heard detailed discussions about restructuring my husband's trust fund to keep my greedy hands off Thornton money. I've been told that I'm expected to either conform completely to your expectations or remove myself from the equation." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Guests began exchanging glances, the social temperature of the room dropping rapidly. "The thing is," I continued, my voice taking on a tone of gentle amusement, "all of these concerns are based on a rather significant misunderstanding." I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, holding it up so everyone could see. "I have here 23 minutes of recorded conversation from earlier this evening, a fascinating discussion about my character, my motives, and my future in this family. Would anyone like to hear it?" The silence was deafening. Vivian's champagne glass trembled in her hand. "No, well, then perhaps I should just summarize the highlights." I paused, savoring the moment. According to the matriarch of this family, I am a calculating woman who seduced Richard during a vulnerable moment. I am someone who needs to be broken down systematically until I become grateful for scraps of acceptance. I am a gold digger who must be prevented from accessing family assets. "Elena, stop this immediately!" Vivian hissed, but her voice lacked its earlier authority. But here's the truly amusing part," I said, my smile widening. "All of this concern about protecting Thornton money from my grasping hands, all of this worry about my financial motivations, It's really quite sweet, actually. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, the screen clearly visible to those at nearby tables. Because you see, ladies and gentlemen, I don't need Thornton money. In fact, I could buy the Thornton estate twice over and still have enough left for a European vacation. The number on my phone screen was clear enough for at least a dozen people to see. I watched their expressions change from confusion to shock to something approaching horror. $54 million, I announced clearly. That's my current liquid net worth, not including real estate holdings, investment portfolios, or my charitable foundation that donated more money last year than this family spends in a decade. The room erupted. Whispers became gasps, became excited conversations as the news rippled through the crowd like wildfire. I could see phones coming out, probably checking my name against tech industry databases, confirming what I'd just revealed. So, you see, I continued over the growing noise, when I heard Mrs. Thornton laughing about my clearance rack dress and my pathetic appearance, when I heard her planning to teach me how to behave in her social circles, I couldn't help but find it ironic. Vivian had gone white. Clara looked like she was going to be sick. Richard sat frozen, his mouth slightly open, staring at me like he'd never seen me before. I chose to dress simply today because I believe elegance comes from within, not from price tags. But apparently, that philosophy was mistaken for poverty. How unfortunate. I closed my phone and slipped it back into my purse, my movements calm and deliberate. I want to thank everyone for such an educational evening. It's been fascinating to learn what this family really thinks of the people they welcome into their circle. The ballroom was in chaos now. Guests were openly staring, some laughing, others looking scandalized. The Thornton family sat in stunned silence while their social standing crumbled around them in real time. "Enjoy the rest of your evening," I said pleasantly, and sat back down. The reckoning had begun. Monday morning arrived with the precision of a surgical strike. While the Thornton family was probably still nursing their hangovers and wounded pride from the weekend's catastrophe, I was already 3 moves ahead in a game they didn't even realize they were losing. At 9:30 sharp, I sat in Marissa's corner office overlooking Central Park, watching her fingers dance across her laptop keyboard with the efficiency of a master pianist. "The foundation paperwork is ready," she said without looking up. $5 million to the Metropolitan Education Initiative, with full media disclosure. The press release goes out in exactly 1 hour. And the timing. Perfect. Monday morning news cycle, maximum visibility. By noon, every major outlet in the city will be running the story. She finally looked up, her eyes gleaming with professional satisfaction. Elena Ward, tech entrepreneur and philanthropist, makes substantial donation to education reform. The Thornton family's new daughter-in-law revealed as surprise benefactor. I leaned back in the leather chair, savoring the moment. They spent the entire weekend trying to figure out if what I said was true. This should remove any lingering doubts. More than that, this establishes you as a serious player in philanthropic circles, someone whose opinion matters, whose influence extends far beyond their little social bubble. Marissa closed the laptop with a satisfied click. They tried to position you as an outsider looking in. Now you're the insider they've been foolish enough to antagonize. My phone buzzed. A text from Richard. "We need to talk. Where are you?" I showed Marissa the message. She laughed. "Let me guess. The family emergency meeting concluded with him being sent to do damage control." "No doubt. Probably with a carefully scripted apology and some desperate attempt to salvage their reputation." "Too late for that. The story's already spreading through social media. Half the wedding guests have posted about it on Instagram. Thornton wedding drama is trending locally." I checked my phone. She was right. Photos from the reception were everywhere, along with shocked commentary about the evening's revelations. The narrative had already shifted completely from their perspective of the gold-digging interloper to the reality of the tech heiress who'd been insulted by social climbers. "There's more," Marissa continued, pulling up another document. "I've been researching the Thornton family finances. Interesting discoveries." such as, Richard's trust fund is worth considerably less than they've been advertising. About $12 million, not the 25 they've been claiming. The family estate is mortgaged to the hilt, and Vivian's been living off credit for the past 2 years, maintaining appearances while hemorrhaging money. The irony was delicious. They'd been so concerned about protecting their wealth from me while their own financial house was built on sand. They're vulnerable, I said. Extremely, and about to become more so. Marissa pulled up a news website on her screen. The story's going live in 3, 2, 1. The headline appeared, Tech heiress Elena Ward donates $5 million to education reform following society wedding. The article was everything we'd hoped for. Professional photos from my company's archives showing me at various tech conferences and charity events. Quotes from industry leaders praising my business acumen and philanthropic vision. A detailed breakdown of my company's sale and subsequent charitable activities. And buried in the third paragraph, almost casually, Ward, who recently married into the prominent Thornton family, surprised wedding guests with the revelation of her substantial wealth during Saturday evening's reception. My phone exploded with notifications, LinkedIn connections, Facebook messages, Instagram followers, Twitter mentions. The tech and business communities were suddenly very interested in Richard Thornton's new wife. The phone calls should start any minute, Marissa predicted. She was right. At 10:15, my phone rang. An unknown number with a Manhattan area code. Elena, this is Diana Blackwood from the Metropolitan Museum Board. I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from Marissa Hale. We'd love to discuss your potential interest in joining our fundraising committee. I put the phone on speaker and raised an eyebrow at Marissa, who was grinning. Ms. Blackwood, what a lovely surprise. I'd be very interested in discussing that opportunity. Wow, wonderful. Are you available for lunch this week? I'd love to introduce you to some other board members. Your background in technology could be incredibly valuable for our digital outreach initiatives. After ending the call, my phone immediately rang again, then again. Charitable organizations, social clubs, investment groups, everyone suddenly wanted Elena Ward's attention and participation. This is brilliant, I told Marissa as we watched my phone light up with yet another call. They're creating the exact opposite of what the Thorntons wanted. Instead of being excluded from society circles, you're being courted by them. Instead of being seen as an outsider, you're being recognized as exactly what you are, someone with real influence and resources. The calls continued throughout the morning. By noon, I had lunch invitations from 3 different charitable organizations, 2 social club membership offers, and an invitation to speak at a tech entrepreneur conference. At 12:30, Richard appeared in Marissa's office lobby. I watched him through the glass walls, pacing nervously while the receptionist called up to announce his arrival. Let him wait, I told Marissa. I'm sure whatever he has to say can hold for a few more minutes. Elena, Marissa said, her tone becoming serious. What's your end game here? Because we're past the point of no return. The Thornton family's reputation in their social circle is permanently damaged. They'll never forgive you for this level of public humiliation. I looked down at Richard through the window, watching him check his watch anxiously, probably calculating how much damage each passing minute was adding to his family's social standing. Forgiveness was never an option, I said quietly. They made their choice when they decided to humiliate me at my own wedding, when they planned to systematically break me down until I became grateful for their scraps of acceptance. And now they get to live with the consequences of underestimating the wrong person. I stood up, smoothing my designer dress, one I'd deliberately chosen from my wardrobe of clothes worth more than most people's cars. It's time for the next phase. Which is, I smiled, watching Richard's increasingly agitated pacing below. Face-to-face negotiations. Let's see how brave they are when they can't hide behind whispered conversations and social ambushes. The game was accelerating, and I was no longer just playing defense. I was going for checkmate. The knock came at exactly 6:15 that evening, sharp and insistent against my hotel suite door. I'd been expecting it since Richard's increasingly desperate texts throughout the afternoon, each one more frantic than the last as the news coverage expanded and their social media mentions multiplied. I opened the door to find Vivian Thornton standing in the hallway, her usual imperious composure cracked around the edges. Gone was the confident woman who'd mocked my dress 72 hours earlier. In her place stood someone who'd clearly spent the day fielding uncomfortable phone calls and watching her carefully constructed social world crumble in real time. "We need to talk," she said without preamble, pushing past me into the suite. "Of course. Please, come in," I said mildly, closing the door behind her. "Can I offer you something to drink?" She whirled around, her eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and desperation. "Don't you dare play the gracious hostess with me! Do you have any idea what you've done?" I settled into the armchair by the window, crossing my legs with deliberate calm. "I've made a charitable donation and attended some business meetings. Hardly scandalous behavior." "You've destroyed us," she hissed. "The phone hasn't stopped ringing. People are talking. Elena, our friends, our business associates, everyone we know. They're all asking questions we can't answer." "What sort of questions?" Vivian began pacing, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown timer. "About how we could have been so blind, about how we treated you, about whether we're the kind of people who attack someone for their perceived poverty only to discover we're the ones who should be embarrassed." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. "I see. And what would you like me to do about that?" She stopped pacing and fixed me with a stare that would have intimidated me 3 days ago. Now it just looked pathetic. "I want you to fix this. Issue a statement saying there was a misunderstanding, that you were joking, or that people misheard what happened at the reception. Something to make this go away." I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. The desperation was becoming more apparent by the minute. "A misunderstanding," I repeated thoughtfully. "About what?" "Exactly about my net worth. About your recorded conversation planning to systematically undermine my confidence, about your son's complete failure to defend his wife when his family attacked her." "Elena, no, please, help me understand what part was misunderstood, because I have 23 minutes of crystal clear audio that suggests everyone understood the situation perfectly." Vivian's face went pale. "You wouldn't actually release that recording." I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. Vivian's own voice filled the room, crisp and clear. Gold diggers like her are dangerous once they have legal standing. I paused the playback and looked up at her. "Wouldn't I?" "This is blackmail," she whispered. "This is documentation. There's a significant difference." I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the growing darkness. "You know what I find most interesting about that recording? It's not the cruelty I expected it's the calculation behind it." I turned back to face her. "You didn't mock me in a moment of anger or frustration. You planned it. You discussed strategies for breaking me down, for making me grateful for whatever scraps of acceptance you might throw my way. You treated psychological manipulation like a business plan." "We were protecting our family." "From what? From a woman who owns more assets than your entire bloodline combined." I walked closer, watching her shrink back slightly. "You were protecting yourselves from the imaginary threat of someone you'd decided was beneath you, and now you want me to help you save face." Vivian's composure finally cracked completely. "What do you want money a public apology? Tell me what it will take to make this stop." "I want you to understand something," I said, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "You called me a gold digger who seduced your son for his inheritance. You planned to restructure his assets to keep me away from Thornton money. You laughed about my dress, my background, my perceived desperation." I paused, letting the weight of her words from the recording settle between us. "But here's what you never bothered to learn about me. Vivian, I sold my company for enough money to buy your family estate 3 times over. I donate more to charity in a year than you spend on your lifestyle. I have connections in industries you've never heard of and influence you can't begin to imagine." Her hands were trembling now. "So when you ask what I want, the answer is simple. I want you to live with the consequences of your assumptions. I want you to explain to your friends why you attacked someone whose charity work they'll be reading about in the society pages. I want you to justify your behavior to business associates who will be courting my investment in their ventures." "Elena, please." "You thought you were dealing with someone powerless, someone who would quietly accept abuse because she had no other choice. You made the mistake of thinking humility meant weakness." I moved closer until I was looking directly into her eyes. "You were wrong about everything, and now everyone knows it." The silence stretched between us, filled only by the distant sounds of traffic far below. There's something else you should know," I said finally. "I've been invited to join the board of 3 different charitable organizations this week. All of them move in your social circles. All of them are very interested in my philanthropic vision and business experience." Vivian's face went ashen. "I'll be attending the Metropolitan Museum Gala next month, the Children's Hospital fundraiser in December, the Arts Council benefit in the spring, all events where I'll be introduced as a major donor and respected member of the community." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "So you see, this isn't going away. I'm not disappearing quietly into the background like you planned. I'm going to be a permanent fixture in exactly the circles where you hoped to exclude me. And every time someone sees me at these events, they're going to remember how spectacularly wrong you were about who I really am." Vivian stood frozen, the full scope of her miscalculation finally becoming clear. "You can't," she breathed. I am, and there's absolutely nothing you can do to stop me." I walked to the door and opened it. "Give my regards to Richard. Tell him his wife sends her love." She walked past me like a woman heading to her own execution, and I closed the door behind her with a soft, final click. Phase 2 was complete. The Metropolitan Museum Gala arrived like a perfectly orchestrated symphony of revenge. 3 weeks had passed since my confrontation with Vivian. 3 weeks of watching the Thornton family's social standing crumble while mine ascended to heights they'd never imagined possible. At 7:45, I stood in the museum's great hall, resplendent in a custom Valentino gown that cost more than most people's annual salary. The irony wasn't lost on me they'd mocked my simple wedding dress, and now I was wearing something that would make their designer clothes look like costume jewelry. The cream of New York society swirled around me, and I was no longer the outsider looking in. I was the guest of honor, the celebrated philanthropist, the tech entrepreneur whose recent donation had made headlines across 3 major newspapers. Elena, Diana Blackwood, appeared at my elbow, her face glowing with social triumph. "I want you to meet Senator Morrison. Senator, this is Elena Ward, our newest board member and the visionary behind the Metropolitan Education Initiative." As I shook hands with the senator, I caught sight of the Thornton family across the room. They stood in a tight cluster near the Egyptian wing, their faces carefully composed but their body language screaming discomfort. Vivian wore a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Clara looked like she'd swallowed something bitter. Richard avoided looking in my direction entirely. "Mrs. Ward," the senator was saying, "I've been following your work in educational technology. Fascinating approach to closing the digital divide." "Thank you. Senator, I believe technology should serve humanity, not the other way around." As our conversation continued, I noticed a photographer moving through the crowd, capturing candid moments of New York's elite. Perfect timing. "Excuse me," I said to the senator, "I need to address something important tonight. Would you mind if I borrowed the microphone for a moment?" "Of course, the floor is yours." Word spread quickly through the crowd that I was going to speak. Within minutes, the great hall had quieted to an expectant hush. I could see the Thornton family shifting nervously in their corner, probably praying I would stick to safe topics like charitable donations and community service. They were about to be disappointed. Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the acoustically perfect space. "First, I want to thank the Metropolitan Museum for this incredible evening and for allowing me to support such important work. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. But tonight, I want to talk about something beyond philanthropy. I want to talk about assumptions. The energy in the room shifted, becoming more focused, more attentive. 3 weeks ago, I attended a wedding my own, actually, where I learned something valuable about human nature. I learned how quickly people can form judgments based on appearances, and how dangerous those judgments can become. I could see Vivian's face going pale across the room. You see, I chose to wear a simple dress that day. Nothing extravagant, nothing designed to impress. And based on that choice, certain individuals concluded that I was poor, desperate, and unworthy of respect. Murmurs began spreading through the crowd. Phones were discreetly emerging from purses and pockets. In fact, I was told, and I quote, that I was a gold digger who had seduced my husband for his money. I was informed that I would need to be taught how to dress appropriately for proper society. I was described as a charity case who should be grateful for whatever acceptance I was given. The murmurs became a low roar of shock and indignation. I could see reporters taking notes, society photographers capturing the moment. These comments weren't made in anger or heat of passion. They were calculated statements, recorded in crystal clear detail, made by people who believed themselves to be my social superiors. I paused, letting the weight of revelation settle over the room. I want to share with you exactly what was said about me, by whom, and why. I pulled out my phone, the same device I'd used to end their arrogance at the wedding reception, because I think it's important that everyone understand how some members of our community treat people they perceive as vulnerable. Elena, don't. Vivian's voice cut across the room, sharp with panic. I looked directly at her, my smile serene and implacable. Mrs. Thornton, how lovely to see you here. I was just about to share your thoughts on gold diggers and charity cases with everyone. I'm sure they'd find your insights illuminating. The crowd turned as one to stare at the Thornton family. I could see the recognition dawning on faces throughout the room. These were the people from the wedding story that had been whispered about for weeks. The recording I'm about to play, I continued, captures a 23-minute conversation about strategies for psychologically breaking down a new family member, about plans to manipulate financial assets to prevent a perceived threat from accessing family money, about the deliberate humiliation of someone they believed to be powerless. I held up the phone, my finger hovering over the play button. Mrs. Thornton, would you like to explain to everyone here why you felt comfortable saying these things about your son's wife? Why you believed someone's perceived poverty made them fair game for public humiliation? The silence was deafening. Vivian stood frozen, her face a mask of horror and rage. Clara had actually taken a step backward, as if physical distance could save her from the social explosion about to occur. No explanation, I asked pleasantly. Then perhaps we should let your own words speak for themselves. I pressed play. Vivian's voice filled the great hall, crisp and clear and utterly damning. Gold diggers like her are dangerous once they have legal standing. We need to make sure she doesn't get her hands on any significant portion of his inheritance. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Gasps, shocked exclamations, the rapid clicking of camera phones capturing the Thornton family's complete social annihilation. Clara's voice joined the recording. She has nothing. No family connections, no money, no social standing. What's she going to do hire a lawyer with her savings account balance? Laughter cruel. Cutting laughter echoed through the museum hall, but now it sounded like the death knell of their reputation. I let 30 seconds of the recording play before stopping it. There's 22.5 minutes more, I announced to the stunned crowd. All of it equally charming. All of it demonstrating exactly how these people treat individuals they believe to be beneath them. The Thornton family stood in the center of what had become a social hurricane, their faces reflecting the complete destruction of everything they'd worked to build. The most ironic part, I continued, is that while they were planning to protect their $12 million estate from my grasping hands, I was sitting on $54 million that I'd earned through my own intelligence and hard work. The crowd erupted. The story would be in every society column, every gossip blog, every social media platform within hours. I smiled at the wreckage I'd created and delivered my final line. I hope tonight serves as a reminder that assumptions can be expensive, and in this case, they cost the Thornton family everything they actually cared about their reputation. The reckoning was complete. The aftermath of the gala was swift and merciless. By 10:30 that night, videos of my speech were trending across every social media platform. Thornton Exposed dominated Twitter. Instagram stories from guests at the museum spread like wildfire. The recording of Vivian's voice had been shared thousands of times before midnight. I stood in my hotel suite, watching the digital destruction unfold in real time. My phone buzzed constantly with interview requests, book deal offers, speaking engagement invitations. The woman they'd tried to humiliate had become the most talked about person in New York society overnight. But the real satisfaction came from the other notifications flooding my screen. Richard's family members were frantically trying to distance themselves from the scandal. Cousins who'd laughed at my dress were posting carefully worded social media statements about not being aware of the full situation. Business associates were quietly removing their connections to Thornton Ventures. Country club memberships were being reconsidered. The Thornton family had been socially eviscerated in less than 4 hours. At 11:15, my phone rang. Richard's name appeared on the screen for the first time since the gala. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Elena," his voice was hollow, defeated. "Please, we need to talk." I thought we covered everything pretty thoroughly at the museum tonight." "You've destroyed my family. My mother. He couldn't finish the sentence. "She's experiencing the consequences of her choices," I said calmly. "Just like you are." "What do you want me to do? Apologize, beg? Tell me what it will take to stop this." I walked to the window, looking down at the city that had just witnessed the complete dismantling of the Thornton legacy. "There's nothing you can do. Richard, this isn't about apologies or negotiations. This is about justice. Justice for what, some words at a wedding?" The casual dismissal in his voice reminded me exactly why I felt no remorse for what I'd done. For the systematic plan to humiliate and control me. For your silence while your family tore me apart. For believing that my perceived poverty made me fair game for psychological abuse. I paused. For being exactly the kind of man who would marry someone he thought was desperate enough to accept whatever treatment his family decided to dish out. Silence on the other end of the line. "You know what the saddest part is. Richard, if you'd defended me even once, if you'd shown an ounce of backbone when they attacked me, none of this would have happened. But you didn't. You sat there and let them destroy what little respect I might have had for you." "Elena, please." "I'm done. Richard, with you, with your family, with this entire situation." I hung up and immediately began blocking numbers. Richard's first, then Vivian's, then Clara's, one by one. I systematically removed every member of the Thornton family from my digital life with the same precision they'd once planned to remove me from their social circle. Each blocked contact felt like a door slamming shut on a chapter of my life that should never have been written. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, probably one of them using a friend's phone to try reaching me. I didn't even read it. I simply added it to the blocked list and moved on. By midnight, I had eliminated every possible avenue of communication between myself and the people who'd made the fatal mistake of underestimating me. The next morning brought a deluge of media coverage. "Tech heiress exposes social elite's cruel deception" ran across the front page of 3 major newspapers. Cable news shows were analyzing the recording, with social commentators dissecting the psychology of wealth-based prejudice. The story had transcended New York society pages and become a national conversation about class, assumptions, and the price of arrogance. I gave exactly one interview to a respected business journalist who understood the deeper implications of what had happened. "The most important lesson here," I told her, "isn't about money or social status. It's about the fundamental human dignity that everyone deserves, regardless of their bank account. The Thornton family decided I was worthless based on a dress. They never bothered to discover who I actually was because they'd already written the story in their heads. And your message to others who might find themselves in similar situations: never let anyone convince you that your worth is determined by their perception of your wealth, and never underestimate the power of someone you've decided to dismiss. The interview would be quoted for months afterward, becoming something of a rallying cry for anyone who'd ever been judged unfairly based on appearances. 6 months later, I received a wedding invitation that made me laugh out loud. Richard was marrying someone from his social circle, old money, appropriate connections, the kind of woman his family had probably wanted him to choose from the beginning. I wished them well in my heart and threw the invitation in the trash without a second thought. The Thornton family had taught me an invaluable lesson about the nature of power and respect. They'd shown me that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the complete absence of your presence in their life. I never spoke to any of them again, and I never regretted blocking them forever. The family that once mocked my outfit at my own wedding now lives with the permanent knowledge that they were humiliated by the very person they'd tried to destroy. They learned too late that assumptions can cost everything: reputation, respect, and the luxury of believing themselves superior to anyone. As for me, I built an even more successful life, surrounded by people who valued character over bank statements and substance over superficial judgments. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's simply walking away and letting someone live with the consequences of who they chose to be. Thank you so much for listening to this story of justice and empowerment. I'd love to hear from you. Please comment below and let me know where you're listening from so we can connect with fellow listeners around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts about Elena's journey and whether you think her response was justified. Your engagement means everything, and I can't wait to hear your perspectives on this tale of assumptions, revenge, and ultimate vindication.